Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm lucky enough to be joined by 2 guests today. My first guest is Simon Holding. Simon is Adult Health and Social Care Lead at Team Teach and part of the Learning and Development team. Simon has worked extensively in a wide range of roles within adult day and residential services. He's an intermediate and advanced Team Teach trainer, delivering training to social care services, including residential, short break, day services, supported living and care homes. I'm also joined by Doremi Littlewood. Doremi has worked in primary special education for over 20 years. She has an honours degree in psychology and specialises in special educational needs and behaviour. She's been a Team Teach tutor for a number of years and has recently joined the team as an engaged trainer. She's in the process of branching out to offer support, advice and training through her own company. And today we are all talking about supporting individuals with complex needs. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Doremi. Hi, Simon. How are you both?
Oh,
good, thank you.
Amazing. I'm very lucky to have 2 people to interview on the podcast today. And I think it's going to be a really interesting episode because we're talking about effective de-escalation in complex needs services. I thought a nice place to start for the listeners is a book recommendation. And I think it's Doremi has got a fantastic book, actually. We talked a bit off air about it.
I do, yes. It's called Ghost Boy by Martin Pistorius. And this is about a young man who at age 12 became extremely unwell. And within 18 months, he was mute and wheelchair bound. Nobody knew the cause of this, and the parents were told it was a degenerative disease, and that his body would remain unresponsive, and his mind actually cognitively he wasn't as aware as he had been, and that he would his cognitive ability would degenerate along with his body. It then took a period of 10 years for this young man, who was in what they call locked-in syndrome, where his carers presumed that cognitively he wasn't aware, that he had no functioning, when actually all the time this young man was fully aware of what was going on. His brain was functioning fully, although his body wasn't. It took a long time for this to be picked up, but once it had, against all the odds, he ended up falling in love, getting married, setting up his own business, his own company, and it was just a really eye-opening story of how we quite often underestimate the abilities of our complex needs individuals, and to never ever give up hope, never underestimate what our young people, our children, our adults are capable of. It's always in there somewhere, and it's about us finding that and enabling them to, have the best life that they can. But yeah, it was just very eye-opening.
Really eye-opening. And I think so often when we're talking about topics like this, the focus is around not service users' perspectives. We just, as staff, interpret quite a lot. And I'm sure we're going to have to talk about that, because that's an element of supporting complex needs. It is that interpretation. So it's so rich, isn't it, to hear an individual's voice of their experiences of not being heard, even though voice was there, or assumptions being made?
Yeah, very much around the assumptions and around the conversations and the environment that these complex individuals are in, and being very mindful of your own impact on that, and how your own preconceptions can be brought forward and imposed, if you like, on individuals with complex needs.
I think imposed is the absolute perfect word there, Doremi. Did you know that you can become a trainer and deliver Team Teach training to staff within your own organisation? Have the flexibility to choose when, where and who you deliver your training to throughout the year. Find out more about this cost-effective option on the Team Teach website. So I'll start with Simon on this reflective question. What you wish you knew then that you know now about the topic?
Yeah, so I would probably say that the thing that I really wish that I knew when I first started it in the mid 1980s, early 1990s was the power of my reaction on somebody else's experiences and then feelings, and how that that can really influence where that behavior then goes, and how just by changing the reaction of the adults around individuals who we support, especially with the more complex needs, how that could have a huge impact on influencing the experience in a more positive way to get the feelings that we would like to see, which will then hopefully in turn lead to behaviors that we'd rather see.
Yeah, it's linking in with that conflict spiral in Team Teach training. Really interesting model to relate to complex needs individuals. Go on, Doremi, you give us your, I'm not saying the question again because it's so hard to word, so just remember the question.
I'll remember the question. I think mine would be very much along the same lines or similar lines as Simon, about self-awareness. And I know that that comes with experience, with knowledge, and everything else, but maybe just knowing a little bit more about myself before I supported children and young people with complex needs. Again, like that conflict spiral, about managing your own conflict spiral, and how we really can set the tone for the environment and for the emotional state of everybody within our local environment, everything within our surroundings, really. So yeah, very much similar to Simon, very much a reflection. We reflect the environment, don't we? So yeah, knowing about myself a little bit more would have been easy to say in hindsight.
It is. I love this question because it is really easy to sit here thinking about our younger professional selves and how we'd improve. But hindsight's a wonderful thing that then perhaps someone listening might take that on board and not have to go through the steep learning curve I'm sure that we all have been through. Just so the listener has a nice understanding of your experience, Simon, just tell us a bit about your professional background.
Yes, so my main background is 20 years working with adults with learning disabilities in residential and also day services. But I have also worked with children in our residential children's homes, and have been a tutor with Team Teach since around about 99, 2000.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. And what about you, Doremi?
So my background is in primary SEN education. I've been supporting children with a vast range of needs and abilities for over 20 years now. I've worked in several roles throughout education. Most recently, I'm come on board as an engaged tutor, but I have been a Team Teach tutor for over 10 years now. I'm just now wanting to spread my knowledge and my experience and hope that others can learn, as we've just said, learn from, what we've done, the experiences that we've had.
Yeah, so important to share those things around. So we're thinking about the topic effective de-escalation in complex needs services. I don't normally start interviews like this, but where should we start? Like, this is big, right, for a 20-minute episode. Simon, where are we going to start with this huge topic?
Yeah, so it is absolutely huge, and we could easily talk about it for days and days. But I think why we wanted to actually talk about it was because it's that question that you get asked when you're doing training, and you get onto the bits where you're looking at how to effectively de-escalate situations. And often when we're asked about so how would you actually de-escalate those individuals with more complex needs who might not have that kind of conversation, or who might not be able to understand either words that are being used, or the advice or the support that's being offered. And I think that one of the things that I usually throw back to people is, firstly, is that the right question that we should be asking? And actually, rather than asking the question about how do we effectively de-escalate our more complex individuals, I think we should be looking at how do we get the environment and the staff right for individuals with more complex needs, because I think that is the bigger question. because one of the things that we find is that there's not a lot of advice out there, and the advice that that is there for services often revolves around the ability of the individual being able to have conversation or to understand those words. So I think that we need to look at more, how do we implement these things all the time, and not just when the person needs to be supported, but how do we get the environment right? How do we get the staff who are supporting that person right, in a way that really helps that person to feel safe? And that's one of the most important things.
It's a good starting point, isn't it? And I suppose thinking about how we might label that on a Team Teach course, that would all be around the positive behaviour supports that we put in to keep that individual at baseline. I mean, I use the term baseline. I kind of just make like making up terms, or equilibrium, however we want to phrase it, calm. But I think something about the topic makes it quite difficult, because each individual with complex needs is going to have inherently hugely different needs, even though it's clumps under the same bracket, isn't it? Where we might have some individuals that have quite physical health needs, as opposed to huge, communication needs. So I think even the title and how we label those differences that those individuals have is a little bit problematic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and we need that, those environments that are able to meet lots of needs, around the emotional needs, the physical needs, the sensory needs, the attachment, requirements. And we also need really strong staff client therapeutic relationships that are really underpinned by trust, by consistency, by fairness, because as you said, these are all key to helping that person to maintain on a sort of daily basis. Absolutely.
Go on, Doremi, talk a little bit about that staff team and building that reflection, because you mentioned that in your reflective question that I won't say again because I'm going to say it wrong. But you mentioned about that staff reflection. How can we start to build that in our teams, where we have the right team with the right knowledge and the right skills?
So being emotionally self-aware and emotionally available is really, really important. Knowing, as Simon touched on, and we both touched on, knowing about how your emotional state affects those around you, and managing your own conflict spiral. It's not as easy as it sounds, balancing your emotional state with that of the child, young person, individual that you're supporting. There's lots and lots of research out there, lots and lots of information, lots of self-help topics around self-awareness, around emotional self-awareness for you to start with, so for your whole team to be aware of each other, aware of themselves, things around emotion coaching. So looking at nurturing and emotionally supportive relationships is a massive thing. Looking at trauma-informed and therapeutic practice, that's all very much around us reflecting on how we are and how we present. Sometimes you can't always be that emotionally available person for whatever reason. There's sometimes just a mismatch, and that's not detrimental or not anything detrimental about the practitioner or the child. Just sometimes people don't gel and people don't match. But it's so important to try and get that right, because it is based on that, as Simon said, that trusting, building that trusting relationship, and that you only get that with consistency. So as Simon had said, not just being around for the time of de-escalation, not just being somebody who's called on to come when this individual is heightened and experiencing crisis. It's about being there consistently throughout, knowing your individual really, really well. And you can't do that if you're not consistent or if you're unpredictable. So a lot of things around self-awareness, you being a bit more predictable for these individuals, and children, young people, individuals with attachment disorder or developmental trauma, quite often they'll test you. So they want to know if you're going to stick around, so to speak. They want to know that you're able to give them that emotional safe space and to keep them emotionally safe, and not just at those times, but throughout the day, throughout everything that they do. It's a massively holistic approach, but definitely, self-awareness and being emotionally available is massive. and
But
developing that within your team and within yourself.
Yeah, and that holistic approach is really coming out. So, you know, we label the title of this podcast, you know, like how to de-escalate someone with complex needs. But I guess what we're finding out through conversation and through, you know, both of yours experiences, it's not as simple as that, is it? Have you got any suggestions, Simon? Because I think particularly in complex needs, I think that debrief, although important in any services, that is a really, really key part, isn't it, of our practice to support those individuals.
Yeah, and it's really, really frustrating when sometimes we we hear from some services, not all, when they say that then that they're unable to do that because they work with complex needs. And what they're assuming is that we're going to be talking about, having a series of questions, about what happened, how that made you feel, and what you might, want to do next, time that happens. So we focus on, a lot when we do the team teach training on, it's not about, actual debrief, it's more about that relationship repair is so important. And that might be as, simple as, we need to leave that person with a new experience. So if they become upset or they become, really, really, really distressed, and that's meant that we might have had to offer some emotional support or even some physical support, what we don't want to do is leave that person with that experience, so that when the staff come back the next day, or when that person comes back to the service the next day, they are immediately met with those members of staff who might recreate those feelings. So we have to replace that with something else. So if we can, and that might be, we had individuals who we used to support who, at the end of the day, before they went back on the bus to go home, the staff who were involved at that time of distress would walk the person onto the bus and have that kind of nice, 2 or 3 minutes whilst we put the seatbelt on and we said we can't wait to see you tomorrow. Or it might be that we actually brush your hair so your hair's nice when you go back home again, and just those little subtle things that just, because you can say to a person, tomorrow's a new day, but if you don't let them experience that, then for some people, they're not going to understand that.
Yeah, it's quite a complex idea. Tomorrow's a new day. I think even for me, is it like it is a new day, but what do we mean by that? We're speaking almost in metaphors, aren't we? I'm so sad because actually we've pretty much run to the length of the podcast. I'm really enjoying our time, and I'm sure the listeners got loads from our conversation. I wondered if we could just end with 3 top tips.
Going back to that self-awareness and the fact that 80% of communication is actually non-verbal. So thinking about how we communicate, so thinking about our body language, our gestures, our stance and everything, all our calm behaviours, but also thinking about how we can assist our individuals with complex needs to communicate with us. So we all agree that behaviour is communication, but we often forget that for these individuals with complex needs, it is their only form of communication. And it's up to us to find a more appropriate form of communication and look at the augmentative and alternative methods. So everything else that's non-verbal, looking at your, right down to your eye gaze, your touch cues, your objects of reference, your symbols, Makaton, up to high-tech devices. But it's all about us being a detective and finding out what tools can we give these individuals that will replace and get them a better outcome than the behaviour that they know meets their needs. So yeah, lots and lots around communication, about the non-verbal communication for both sides, for the person supporting and for the individual.
Yeah, so the one that I was going to look at would be the staff supporting individuals with more complex needs need to be aware of the characteristics of an effective de-escalator to enable effective de-escalation. And that's at all times, not just when behaviours of concern present. So it's about how we do those meets and greets on the morning, how we support you throughout the day, how we leave you at the end of the day, so that you want to come back, that next day. How we get the environments right. How we got the safe spaces, how we got the safe rooms, how we got the lighting right, how we got the the sound right. Is it too busy? Is it too loud? And if so, how can we influence that in a way that helps that person to feel safe? But also having the right staff around that person who are very, very much in control, who can actually pass the sort of tests that were mentioned earlier on about being really, really confident, safe, and also focused and in control, around that person at all times.
And I'd just like to finish with a little bit picking up on Simon said about environments and about whether it's too noisy, whether it's too bright. For me, a massive game changer was sensory processing and research around sensory processing disorders, working alongside a fabulous occupational therapist that changed the lives of many of the young people and families that I worked with and supported. There is so much information and it's forever developing. That would be like a 4-hour podcast on its own. So I would, if I can have people go away with anything, it would be look at sensory processing and look at how that can change the lives of the individuals with complex needs that you're supporting.
Oh, such fantastic tips there. And I think the listener's going to have loads to digest after the episode. Thank you both so much for coming on, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. There are plenty more helpful ideas, information, and inspiration right here in the Team Teach Hub. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.